Hello, fictional. Welcome to the crossover What Ifs. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the last Woodbender and got harem? Part 3. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Naruto is currently practicing his woodbending as Sokka approaches Katara and Aang, who are just lounging around. When Sokka reaches the two, Aang jumps up to his feet in front of Sokka. Great. You're back. What's for dinner? Aang asks. Sokka opens the bag he was carrying in front of the two. We've got a few options. First, round nuts and some kind of oval-shaped nuts. And some rock-shaped nuts that might just be rocks, Sokka says as he throws a rock behind him. Dig in, he says before getting whacked in the back of the head by wood. That's not food, you oaf, Naruto says as he walks over to the three. Seriously, what else you got? Katara asks. Sokka looks inside his bag as Naruto turns and looks at Momo, who is playing with the rock-shaped nut that Sokka collected for food. A loud and deep boom can be heard in the distance. What was that? Sokka asks nervously. Another loud boom can be heard just seconds later, causing Sokka to become even more nervous. It's coming from over there. Aang yells out as he and Katara start to run towards where they heard the boom. Naruto and Sokka just stand still, watching the two run off as if they're crazy. Shouldn't we run away from the huge booms, not toward them? Sokka asks only to receive no acknowledgement from the two. You have got to be kidding me, Naruto says before running after Katara and Aang. As Naruto catches up to Katara and Aang, he follows their line of sight and sees that they are watching a man earthbend. An earthbender, Katara says in awe. Big whoop. Earthbenders have the highest population of benders in the world, Naruto says to Katara, only to earn a glare from her. Let's go meet him, Aang proposes excitedly. He looks dangerous, so we better approach cautiously, Sokka says, to which Naruto nods in agreement before he hears Katara shouting. Hello there. I'm Katara. What's your name? Katara asks in a friendly tone. The earthbender turns and sees Katara as Naruto runs up to her and steps in front of her protectively, just in case he was hostile. The earthbender sees Naruto and starts to run away, using earthbending to block them from following him. Aang runs up to Naruto and Katara before yelling out to the earthbender. Nice to meet you. Aang yells, only earning a facepalm from Naruto before the male woodbender turns to Katara. Katara, what made you think it was a good idea to sneak up on a stranger like that? An earthbender too. You could have been killed, Naruto said, annoyed. I just wanted to say hi, Katara said, trying to defend herself. Besides, I have you to protect me, right? Katara asks. You make me tired, Katara, Naruto says quietly. Hey, that guy's got to be running somewhere. Maybe we're near a village. And I bet that village has a market, Aang says excitedly. Which means no nuts for dinner, Katara says, also excited. Nuts? I think you mean rocks, Naruto jokes as Katara and Aang run off in the direction the earthbender went. Hey. I worked hard to get those nuts, Sokka yelled out. Momo flies past him, following Katara and Aang as Naruto and Sokka follow behind. Yeah, I hate them, too, Sokka says as he trails behind Naruto. Eventually, they reach the village and go into the market, where they start to look around. Katara and Naruto walk before they spot the earthbender from before walking into a building. Katara excitedly follows the bender into the building with Naruto close behind. As they walk in, they see the earthbender they ran into earlier and a woman behind a counter. Hey. You're that kid. Why did you run away before? Katara asks, causing the boy to get nervous. Naruto just stands behind Katara awkwardly as he scratches the back of his head. You must have me confused with some other kid, the boy says nervously. Yeah, Katara, I think you have the wrong person, Naruto says awkwardly. No, she doesn't. We saw you earthbending, Aang says as he and Sokka walk into the building. They saw you doing what, the woman asks angrily, almost shouting at the kid. They're crazy, Mom. I mean, look at how they're dressed, he says, trying to get himself out of trouble. Hey man, I'm on your side, but that was low, Naruto says to the boy. You know how dangerous that is. You know what would happen if they caught you earthbending, the mother says to her son, disappointed. They then hear banging on the door. Open up, says the voice of a man. Sokka looks through the blinds of the front window and sees Fire Nation soldiers were the ones at the door. Fire Nation. Act natural. Sokka whisper yells. The woman goes and opens the door as one of the soldiers walks in and looks around the room. He sees Aang with a hat on, leaning against a barrel with a dopey smile on his face, Katara awkwardly eating some berries, Sokka weirdly studying an apple, the earthbender unconvincingly deep in thought, and Naruto, who was actually doing a decent job at being natural by looking at the products on the shelves. What do you want? I've already paid you for this week, the woman says to the soldier. The Fire Nation soldier just turns to her with an evil smile. The tax just doubled. And we wouldn't want an accident, would we? The soldier asks before creating a ball of fire with his hands. Fire is sometimes so hard to control, the soldier threatens. This angers Naruto as he gathers some water from a barrel around his palm. Not when you have water, Naruto says before throwing the water to douse the fire, causing steam to blow up in the soldier's face. This angers the soldier as he glares at Naruto. Since you're just a teenager, I'm going to give you another chance. You can apologize now, or I light this whole store up in flames. Your choice, young man, he says threateningly. Naruto glares at the man before looking over at the woman who had fear in her eyes. Apologies for my immaturity, sir, Naruto says through gritted teeth. The soldier smiled smugly at the young woodbender. That's more like it, he says before kicking Naruto backwards onto his back. He then walks over to the woman and takes the money for taxes put in place by the Fire Nation. You can keep the copper ones, he says, dropping the copper pieces on the floor. He then walks out of the building, slamming the door. Katara immediately runs over to Naruto and helps him up off the ground. Nice guy, Naruto says sarcastically. How long has the Fire Nation been here? Naruto asks the woman who was picking up the copper pieces off the ground. 5 years. Fire Lord Ozai uses our town's coal mines to fuel his ships, the woman answers. They're thugs. They steal from us. And everyone here is too much of a coward to do anything about it. Well, except you, I guess. But look how that turned out, the boy says angrily. White Haru. Don't talk like that. Haru's mom yells. Why shouldn't he talk like that? Those guys are jerks. Also, for the record, I could have totally taken that guy. I just didn't want your shop to get burned to a crisp, Naruto says defensively. Also, Haru's an earthbender. He can help, Katara says. Earthbending is forbidden. It's caused nothing but misery for this village. He must never use his abilities, Haru's mom argues. How can you say that? Haru has a gift. Asking him not to earthbend is like asking me not to waterbend. It's a part of who we are, Katara says, not truly grasping the reasoning behind Haru hiding his bending. You don't understand, Haru's mom says. I understand that Haru can help you fight back. What can the Fire Nation do to you that they haven't done already? Katara asks, not expecting to hear anything worse than she has heard before. They could take Haru away, like they took his father, Haru's mother says as everyone looks at her in shock, well, except for Naruto. Later, Haru takes the 4 of them to his family's barn. My mom said that you can sleep here tonight. But it would be best if you left in the morning, Haru says with a hint of sadness. Thanks. I'll make sure Appa doesn't eat all your hay, Aang says before they start to unpack. Appa just looks at Aang with a look. How are you going to do that? Before starting eating hay like a giant bison. Katara goes on a walk with Haru, leaving the 3 boys alone. Naruto didn't think anything of it until Aang brought it up. What do you think they're doing, I mean on their walk? Aang asks curiously. It's a walk, what do you think they're doing, Aang? Naruto asks, not understanding why Aang would ask a question like that. No, Aang's right. They're probably out there smooching, Sokka says, trying to be funny. They better not be, Aang says under his breath, however, Naruto hears this. What, you have a crush on Katara or something, Aang? Naruto asks in a teasing tone. What? Of course not. I mean, it's Katara, Aang says, trying to get away from the question. Smooth, Naruto says under his breath before chuckling. Hey. That's my sister you're talking about, Sokka says. This makes Aang become nervous, and Naruto starts to laugh. Aang and Sokka begin to talk to each other as Aang tries to explain what he meant, only for his explanations to make it worse. This happens until Katara comes back with a huge smile on her face. Katara explains what happened on her and Haru's walk and how Haru saved an old man with his earthbending. While Katara talked about her little story, Naruto was in the corner singing quietly under his breath. It was so brave of Haru to use his earthbending to help that old man, Katara says with a hint of awe. You must have really inspired him, Aang says as he listens to Katara intently. I guess so, Katara says before turning to Naruto, who is singing quietly. You gonna just sit there and sing only to yourself? Katara says with a grin and an eyebrow raised. I don't think Naruto starts to disagree but is cut off by Aang. Yeah. Sing something for us, Naruto. Aang says excitedly. Naruto looks at the excited smile on Aang's face before looking over at Katara and seeing a warm and encouraging smile. He looks over at Sokka, who just shrugs his shoulders. Okay, Naruto says, accepting defeat before walking. He starts to sing a song. Living life is fun, and we've just begun. To get our share of this world's delights. High hopes we have for the future. And our goals in sight. No, we don't get depressed. Here's what we call our golden rule. Have faith in you and the things you do. You won't go wrong, oh no. This is our family jewel. Naruto sings the opening part of the song as Aang continues to have that huge smile on his face as he starts to sway back and forth. Naruto looks up and he sees Katara watching him intently and happily. She listens closely to the lyrics as she quickly picks up on the fact that it's a song about family. Naruto sings the chorus before he looks up at the others with a smile, as there is a break between lyrics. We are family. Yeah, sing it to me. I got all my sisters with me. We are family. Oh, I can hear you now. Get up everybody and sing. We are family. I got all my sisters with me. We are family. Get up everybody and sing. Naruto continued to sing his song, but now he was singing with more confidence. After several minutes of singing, he stops. Naruto finishes the song and looks up to see Aang clapping ecstatically as Katara smiles brightly at him. That was really good, but we should probably go to sleep. We're leaving at dawn, Sokka says. This causes Katara to turn sharply towards her brother. Dawn? Can't we sleep in for once? Katara asks, annoyed. Absolutely not. This village is crawling with Fire Nation troops. If they discover you're here, Aang, we'll be eating fireballs for breakfast. Good night. Sokka says before turning away from them. I'd rather eat fireballs than nuts, Katara quips. Good night, Sokka says, causing Aang and Katara to laugh. Naruto watches all of this go on in front of him before Katara blows out the candle that is lighting up the room. As soon as the others fall asleep, Naruto sneaks outside to master his woodbending. He knows he is close to doing what he is trying. As he walks to find a suitable place to train, he hears stomps of people. He runs behind a fence and looks around the corner to see Fire Nation troops walking towards Haru's house. They knock on the door and wait until Haru opens it. That's him. That's the earthbender. An old man yells while pointing at Haru. The Fire Nation soldiers then grab Haru. Naruto intervenes, he kicks the soldier in the back, not wanting yet to reveal that he could woodbend. Hey, assholes. Leave the guy alone, Naruto yells. Several soldiers rush towards Naruto, who jumps, kicking one of them in the head, his nose broken. The soldiers start whimpering around in pain. Another firebend at Naruto, who ran around before jumping over the soldier, a single kick, knocking him unconscious. One of them yelled behind Naruto before letting out a burst of flame towards the blonde who hid behind a rock before rushing towards the soldier who was caught off guard by his speed as Naruto kicked his knee, breaking his leg. The soldier screamed out in pain. Naruto was about to knock him unconscious when. Don't move, or I will scorch them, 3 other soldiers yelled, aiming their fists towards the kid and his mother. One of them holds a palm engulfed in flames close to the kid's face. Naruto clenched his teeth in anger. He knew he couldn't defeat them without risking Haru, who looked as white as snow. Naruto raises his hands and surrenders. Naruto and Haru are taken onto a Fire Nation Navy ship together as they are being taken towards an earthbender prison. Why didn't you defeat them? Haru asks quietly. Naruto looks at him before responding. I couldn't just risk you. Besides, they are most likely taking us to a place far away from any land. Why do you think we're on a ship? Naruto says. Haru nods in understanding before responding. You better have a plan cause I don't think you can take down how many soldiers there are at this prison, Haru says. First of all, I can take down as many soldiers as I need to. Second of all, no, I don't have a plan, but I'll come up with something, Naruto says before they arrive at the prison, which was a giant metal ship that was in the middle of the ocean, miles away from all land. Haru, Naruto, and a couple of other earthbenders walk off of the ship they were transported on and onto the prison ship, where they line up, side by side. A couple of minutes later, a man who seemed to be a higher-ranked officer of the Fire Nation comes out to greet them. Earthbenders, it is my pleasure to welcome you aboard my modest shipyard. I am your warden. I prefer to think of you not as prisoners but as honored guests. And I hope that you will come to think of me as your humble and caring host. The warden monologues as everyone, but Naruto looks at him. The warden notices this and walks towards Naruto before hitting him across the face. Look at me when I am talking to you, the warden says, trying to be intimidating. Naruto just scoffs before looking at the warden. Isn't that better? The warden asks. You hid with as much power as the Fire Nation has honored, Naruto insults, angering the warden. The warden sends a kick towards Naruto's midsection, causing him to fall to his knees. Naruto breathes heavily before looking up at the angry face of the warden. I guess the same can be said for your kicks, Naruto quips. The warden grabs Naruto by his collar and pulls it upwards. You may have the strength to rebel now, but trust me when I say that same strength will quickly diminish, the warden says quietly yet sternly. Maybe after a few years here, me and you will be on even ground, Naruto says before the warden throws them to the ground. Take them away, the warden orders the guards. The guards escort a group of prisoners to the main yard. Haru and Naruto look around before Haru's eyes land on a man far away. He starts to move towards the man, with Naruto following behind him. When Naruto finally catches up with Haru, he sees him hugging an older man. Naruto walks up to them as Haru turns to them. Naruto, this is my father, Haru says, gesturing to the man next to him. I'm Tairo. I'm sorry for what happened, but I appreciate that you tried to save my son, the man says as he shakes Naruto's hand. Don't worry, we will leave soon, Naruto trying to lighten up the mood. I'm afraid that we are doomed here, Tyro says before turning away and sitting down on the ground. Naruto just looks at him, shocked, before turning to Haru. I guess being here so long has done some damage on their souls. I'm going to go look around, maybe find a way to get all these people out of here, Naruto says before walking off, leaving Haru with his father. Naruto walks around and uses his physical prowess to get to higher places to have a view of the whole courtyard. As he is looking around, he sees a familiar face, Katara. He jumps down to the ground below him and rushes over to Katara before grabbing her arm. Katara, what are you doing here? Naruto asks, almost yelling as Katara turns and looks at him. Naruto. She yells before wrapping him into a hug. Naruto lightly hugs her back before pulling away. What are you doing here? Naruto asks again. Haru's mom told us that you two got captured, Katara answers. Haru then sees Katara and runs up to the two. Katara. What are you doing here? Haru asks. It's my fault you two got captured, Katara answers. So you got yourself arrested? Haru asks as if Katara is crazy. It was the only way to find you guys, Katara answers. Haru leans back, slightly impressed by Katara. You've got guts, Katara. I'll give you that. Come on, there's someone I want you to meet, Haru says before leading the two back over to Tyro. Katara, this is my father, Tyro, Haru says before turning to Tyro. Dad, this is Katara, Haru introduces. It's an honor to meet you, Katara says while bowing. Tyro reaches over to a bowl of soup and hands it to Katara. Have some dinner, Katara, Tyro says. Katara happily takes the bowl before looking down at what's in it and making a disgusted noise. It's not as bad as it looks, Tyro adds. Katara looks at him before hesitantly taking a spoonful of it. After swallowing it, she once again makes a sound of disgust. It's still pretty bad, though, Tyro says with a small smile. A fellow prisoner then walks up and puts his hand on Tyro's shoulder. Tyro, the prisoners, are complaining that there aren't enough blankets to go around, the prisoner informs. I'll talk to the guards. In the meantime, make sure the elderly are taken care of. The rest of us will simply have to hope for warmer weather, Tyro says. The prisoner nods and walks off to do as he was told. If you don't mind me asking, what's your escape plan? Katara asks, which earns a sigh from Naruto. Excuse me? Tyro asks, confused. You know, the plan to get everyone off the rig. What is it? Mutiny, sabotage. Katara asks. The plan is to survive, wait out this war, hope that one day some of us can get back home and forget this ever happened, Tyro answers in a somewhat depressing way. How can you say that? Katara exclaims. You sound like you've already given up, Katara quickly adds. That's because they have. You can't help the ones who don't want to be helped, Naruto says, which is seemingly just ignored by everyone, slightly annoying Naruto. Katara, I admire your courage, and I envy your youth. But people's lives are at stake here. The warden is a ruthless man, and he won't stand for any rebellion. I'm sorry, but we're powerless, Tyro says sadly. We'll see about that, Katara says with determination in her eyes. She walks over to a table and grabs a pot lid and a ladle. What is she doing? Haru asks Naruto. As if I would know, Naruto jokes. Katara bangs the ladle and pot lid together, gaining the attention of all the prisoners. Earthbenders. You don't know me, but I know of you. Every child in my water tribe village was rocked to sleep with stories of the brave Earth Kingdom and the courageous Earthbenders who guard its borders. Some of you may think that the Fire Nation has made you powerless. Yes, they have taken away your ability to bend. But they can't take away your courage. And it is your courage they should truly fear because it runs deeper than any mine you've been forced to dig, any ocean that keeps you far from home. It is the strength of your hearts that make you who you are, hearts that will remain unbroken when all rock and stone has eroded away. The time to fight back is now. I can tell you that the Avatar has returned. So remember your courage, Earthbenders. Let us fight for our freedom. Katara monologues. Naruto looks around and sees hope growing in the Earthbender's eyes before it quickly fades away and turns back to despair. Time skip. Naruto and Katara are currently sleeping on the cold metal ground of the prison ship when they are both suddenly shaken awake. They lean up and see Aang, who has a finger to his mouth, signaling for them to be quiet. Katara and Naruto follow Aang over to the edge of the ship where they see Sokka and Appa, who are floating in the ocean. Their 12 hours are up. Where's Haru? We've got to get out of here, Sokka says urgently. I can't, Katara says with a guilt-ridden look on her face. We don't have much time. There are guards everywhere. Get on. Sokka orders as Aang jumps onto Appa, leaving Naruto and Katara still standing on the ship. Katara, what's wrong? Aang asks. I'm not leaving. I will not give up on these people, Katara says sternly. What do you mean you're not leaving? Sokka yells. We can't abandon these people. There has to be a way to help them, Katara insists. Maybe she's right. What do you say, Sokka? Aang asks with a smile before turning to look at Sokka. I say you're both crazy. Last chance. We need to go now, Sokka demands, pointing the finger at Appa. No, Katara says defiantly. I hate when you get like this, Sokka says before the guard spotlight thing hovers right next to them. Come on, we better hide, Sokka says before the four run off. Aang goes over and tells Appa to fly away for now. Naruto turns back and sees that two of the guards saw Appa. He quickly kicks them overboard, leaving them to die. He quickly catches up to the others who are hiding behind a pile of cargo crates. We don't have much time. What are we going to do? Sokka asks impatiently. I wish I knew how to make a hurricane, Aang says, earning "Are you serious?" looks from Sokka and Katara. Naruto starts to think about it and comes to the conclusion that it could be possible if Aang could go into Avatar state. The warden would run away and we would steal his keys, Aang adds, which causes Naruto to sigh. Wouldn't he just take his keys with him? Sokka asks. I'm just tossing ideas around, Aang says defensively. I tried talking the earthbenders into fighting back, but it didn't work. If there was just a way to help them help themselves, Katara says sadly. For that, they need some kind of earth or some rock, something they can bend, Sokka concludes. But this entire place is made of metal, Katara says, causing the four to come to a roadblock. Naruto looks around before looking up at the sky and seeing the smoke coming out of the ship's exhaust ports. That's not completely true. Look, Naruto says while pointing up at the smoke. They're probably burning coal. In other words, the earth, Naruto concludes. Time skip. Naruto, Katara, and Sokka are currently leaning over a vent in the middle of the prison courtyard. It's almost dawn. We're running out of time. Are you sure this is going to work? Katara asks Sokka. It should. These vents reminded me of our little trick back at the village. We're going to do the same thing, but on a much bigger scale, Sokka says before gesturing to the huge area around him. There's a huge deposit of coal at the base of this island. And the whole system is ventilated. Aang closed off all the vents except one. When he does his airbending, the coal only has one place to go, right back here, Sokka explains. There's the intruders. A guard yells. Naruto, Katara, and Sokka all stand up and look up to see that they are surrounded by guards who have spears in hand. Stay back. I'm warning you. Sokka says before pulling out his boomerang. Katara, Naruto, stop. You can't win this fight, Tyra yells. Listen to him well, children. You two are one mistake away from dying where you stand, the warden says while walking up to the three. The rumbling is then heard before a huge amount of coal launches out of the vent and in front of the earthbenders. Aang quickly follows the coal, jumping out and landing next to Naruto. This is your chance, earthbenders. Take it. Your fate is within your own hands. Katara yells while holding up a piece of coal. Naruto looks around and sees Haru try to step forward but is stopped by Tyro. The warden's maniacal laughter is then heard behind the gang. Foolish girl. You thought a few inspirational words and some coal would change these people? He asks in a condescending tone. Look at these blank hopeless faces. Their spirits were broken a long time ago. Oh. But you still believed in them. How sweet. They're a waste of your energy, little girl. You failed, the warden claims before turning around to walk off. Alright, that's enough. Naruto yells out in frustration before kicking the warden's face. A crack is heard as warden's nose starts bleeding. How pathetic. One foolish little boy thinks he can take on the Fire Nation. Look around you, boy. You are all alone, the warden says before being hit in the head with a piece of coal. He's not alone, Haru says before walking up next to him. The warden huffs before sending a blast of fire at the two, only for it to be blocked by a wall of coal. Naruto and Haru turn around to see Tyro and a couple of other prisoners bending the coal in front of the two. For the Earth Kingdom. Attack. Tyro yells, causing all the prisoners to run forward and start to fight the firebenders. Naruto rushes forward to engage with the warden. The warden sends fire towards him, but Naruto crouches before it hits him before he jumps and hits warden's nose again with his fist, and again and again. Jumping, he hits him in the chest, effectively knocking him to the ground. He watches as the earthbenders move the coal under him and the other guards, before hovering it above the water. No. Please. I can't swim, the warden begs. Don't worry. I hear cowards float, Tyro says before releasing his control over the coal, letting them fall into the ocean. Time skip. Naruto and Katara are currently on a smaller escort Fire Nation ship with the now former earthbender prisoners. Haru walks up to the two before speaking. I wanted to thank you two for saving me, saving us, Haru says, looking at his father and the other earthbenders. Naruto nods at him while Katara awkwardly scratches the back of her neck. All it took was a little coal, Katara says sheepishly, which Naruto smirks at. It wasn't the coal. Thank you for helping me find my courage, Katara and Naruto. My family and everyone here owes you much, Tyro says gratefully. So, I guess you're going home now? Katara asks. Yes. To take back my village, Tyro says before turning to the rest of the earthbenders. To take back all of our villages. The Fire Nation will regret the day they set foot on our land. Tyro yells, earning cheers from everyone. Come with us, Haru says. We can't. Your mission is to take back your home. Ours is to get onto the North Pole, Katara says. That's him, isn't it? The Avatar, Haru says, looking over at Aang. Katara, Naruto, thank you for bringing my father back to me. I never thought I'd see him again. I only wished there was some way Haru starts but is cut off by Katara. I know, Katara says, reaching for her necklace, only to realize that it's not there. My mother's necklace. It's gone. Katara yells. Somewhere else, Katara's mother's necklace is picked up by Zuko. Naruto and the rest of the gang are currently flying on Appa, right above the clouds. Naruto leans back against the edge of the saddle, trying to relax after what happened with Haru in the earthbender prison. Those clouds look so soft, don't they? Katara asks, causing Naruto to look over at her. He sees that she is on her stomach and waving her feet back and forth while watching the clouds pass by. Like you could just jump down and you'd land in a big soft cottony heap, Katara says, seemingly daydreaming. Maybe you should give it a try, Sokka says with a smirk. You're hilarious, Katara says sarcastically. I'll try it. Aang says excitedly before jumping off of Appa and down into the clouds below. Katara and Sokka quickly look over to the edge, worried for what is to happen to Aang. Naruto just sighs and leans back, knowing that Aang will be fine. Katara and Sokka turn around to see Aang fly back up with his glider and land back on Appa with water dripping from his clothes. Turns out clouds are made of water, Aang says before creating an air bubble around him, drying himself off. Hey, what is that? Katara asks, pointing down to the ground where there is just a huge area of black. It's like a scar, Sokka says in a depressing manner. Naruto moves forward so he can see what they are talking about. When he finally sees it, he feels something inside him become angry. They decide to land on the giant area of blackness where they get off and start to look around. Naruto looks around and sees that all the trees within 3 miles destroyed. Listen, it's so quiet. There's no life anywhere, Sokka says depressingly. Aang, are you okay? Katara asks the boy who has been nothing but quiet since they landed. Fire Nation. Sokka yells, seeing footprints of Komodo rhinos which are exclusively used by Fire Nation soldiers. Those evil savages make me sick. They have no respect for Sokka starts to yell before being shh''d by Katara. What, I'm not allowed to be angry? Sokka asks annoyed before realizing that Katara was looking at Aang, who fell to the ground and ran his hands across the ash and dirt. Why would anyone do this? How could I let this happen? Aang asks, blaming himself for what has happened. Aang, you didn't let this happen. It has nothing to do with you, Katara says, trying to comfort the monk. Yes it does. It's the Avatar's job to protect nature, but I don't know how to do my job, Aang says. That's why we're going to the North Pole, to find you a teacher, Katara responds. Yeah, a waterbending teacher. But there's no one who can teach me how to be the Avatar. Monk Jyatsu said that Avatar Roku would help me, Aang states. The Avatar before you? He died over 100 years ago. How are you supposed to talk to him? Sokka says, not understanding. I don't know, Aang says, also not understanding. Naruto could have been of some assistance here if he wasn't looking out at just how much damage was done to the forest. Slamming his hands down at the ground, suddenly trees grew all around them. His friends watched in awe as more and more trees grew, returning the place to its natural state. Aang smiled at Naruto smiled back, Katara nodded in approval, now it didn't look as dead as before. Small time skip. Naruto slightly smiles at the now happy Aang before he hears footsteps. He turns to his right and sees an old man with a walking stick in hand, making his way to the fore. Hey, who are you? Sokka asks, trying to be intimidating, but it came off as more confused. The man, however, just ignores Sokka and walks over to Aang. When I saw the flying bison, I thought it was impossible, but those markings, are you the Avatar, child? The man asks. Aang looks back at Naruto and Katara, asking for their approval to say yes. The two nod, causing Aang to turn back to the man and nod himself. My village desperately needs your help, the old man pleads. Time skip. Naruto and the rest of the gang follow the man to his village. When they enter the village they see multiple destroyed buildings. The man takes the 4 of them inside of a large building that is in the middle of the village. When they walk inside, they see all of the villagers together inside. This young person is the Avatar, the old man says, gesturing over to Aang. So the rumors of your return are true. It is the greatest honor of a lifetime to be in your presence, a middle-aged man says, stepping forward to greet Aang. Nice to meet you too. So, is there something I can help you with? Aang asks awkwardly. I'm not sure, the man says. Our village is in crisis. He's our only hope, the old man who had brought them here exclaims. For the last few days at sunset, a spirit monster comes and attacks our village. He is Hei Bai, the black and white spirit, the old man says to the gang. Why is it attacking you? Sasuke asks. We do not know. But each of the last 3 nights, he had abducted one of our own. We are especially fearful because the winter solstice draws near, the middle-aged man says, walking over to the window and looking out towards the village. What happens then? Katara asks. As the solstice approaches, the natural world and the spirit world grow closer and closer until the line between them is blurred completely, the old man answers. Hei Bai is already causing devastation and destruction. Once the solstice is here, there is no telling what will happen, the other man adds. So, what do you want me to do exactly? Aang asks, not catching on to the hints they had been giving him. Who better to resolve a crisis between our world and the spirit world than the Avatar himself? The old man asks, gaining a confused expression from Aang. You are the great bridge between man and spirits, the old man adds. Right. That's me, Aang says, just finding out about all this. Hey, great bridge guy. Can I talk to you over here for a second? Katara asks. Aang nods and follows her over to a corner, away from the rest of the people. Aang, you seem a little unsure about this, Katara points out. Yeah, that might be because I don't know anything at all about the spirit world, Aang says, right as Sokka and Naruto walk over. Katara, Sokka, and Naruto all share a look with each other. It's not like there's someone to teach me this stuff, Aang exclaims. Sokka and Katara look over at Naruto for a second before Aang looks over to him as well. Naruto looks at the 3 and realizes they are silently asking him a question. What? I've never been. Just because I come from an ancient family of woodbenders doesn't mean I can help, Naruto says defensively. See, Naruto understands, Aang says, putting his arm around the much taller woodbender. So, can you help these people? Katara asks. Aang and Naruto look at each other, unsure before nodding. We have to try, don't we? Naruto asks. Yeah, maybe whatever I have to do will just come to me, Aang says in a hopeful manner. I think you can do it, guys, Katara says in support. Yeah, we're all gonna get eaten by a spirit monster, Sokka says. A couple minutes later, Naruto and Aang walk out of the building and into the streets of the village. The villagers close the door behind them, fearful of what was to come next. Aang and Naruto start to walk cautiously through the village. Hello? Spirit. Can you hear me? This is the Avatar speaking, Aang says. However, there was no spirit in sight. You seriously think that is going to work? Naruto asks. Well, I don't see any better options, Aang says, causing Naruto to shrug his shoulders. I'm here to try to help stuff. Aang yells out. This isn't right, Sokka says to Katara, back inside the building, watching Aang and Naruto through the window. We can't sit here and cower while Aang and Naruto wait for some monster to show up, Sokka says, frustrated. If anyone can save us, it's the Avatar, the old man says. They still shouldn't have to face this alone, Sokka says. The sun then finally sets over the horizon. The sun is set. Where are you, Hei Bai? Well, spirit, I hereby ask you to please leave this village in peace, Aang says to thin air and putting his hand out dramatically. Aang spins his staff before slamming the end on the ground. After this is done, all that can be heard are crickets. Okay. Well, I guess that's settled, then Aang says before turning and walking back towards the main village building. Naruto stands there, facepalming before following Aang. The two continue to walk back before feeling a presence behind them. The two quickly turn around and that's when they see him, Hei Bai. You must be the Hei Bai spirit. My name is Aang starts, but is cut off when Hei Bai lets out a loud roar, sending a blue beam of light at them. It passes right around them before Hei Bai walks past them and further into the city. My name is Aang, and this is Naruto. I'm the Avatar and we would like to help. Aang yells. Hei Bai doesn't listen though, and starts to destroy more buildings. He destroys a building that was already almost completely destroyed. He somehow teleports over to another building and punches it, slightly damaging it. He then teleports again, over to a watchtower and punches it, causing it to collapse. Aang and Naruto continue chasing after it, Aang shouting nonsense, and Naruto foolishly trying to get in its way. It doesn't seem too interested in what he's saying. Maybe we should go help him, Sokka says, worried for Naruto and Aang. No. Only a spirit stands chance against the Hei Bai, the old man objects. Naruto and Aang will figure out the right thing to do, Sokka Katara reassures. Please, would you stop destroying things and listen? Aang pleads with the angry spirit who just continues to ignore him. Naruto meanwhile, uses his wood bending trying to cage it somehow, despite thinking that might be a waste of time. I'm just trying to do my job as spirit bridge. Excuse me, would you please turn around? Aang asks, to no avail. This starts to frustrate the Avatar until he snaps. I command you to turn around, now. Aang yells. Hei Bai stops what he is doing before turning around and smacking Ong away. This seems to cause Sokka to snap. That's it. They need help. Sokka yells before running out. Katara yells after to him to stop, but he doesn't listen to her words. Hei Bai. Over here. Sokka yells before throwing his boomerang at the giant spirit, hitting his backside. This gains no reaction from Hei Bai, slightly disappointing Sokka. He runs forward and stops next to Ong as Naruto was on the roof, right behind the spirit. Sokka, go back. Ong yells. We'll fight him together, Sokka says. I don't want to fight him unless I have, Ong says before turning and seeing Naruto, who had jumped on the back of the spirit and created a lasso out of thin, easily to bend wood that wraps tightly around the spirit. Hei Bai, who is angered by this, runs forward and grabs Sokka before running away from the village. The spirit runs away and into the forest, trying to knock Naruto off of him along the way. Naruto looks up and sees Ong gliding a bit behind him. Naruto hears Sokka's frantic screaming as Hei Bai runs out of the forest and into the destroyed and scarred part of what used to be the rest of the forest. Ong nears Sokka and Naruto, who tries his hardest to rein back Hei Bai, but to no avail. Ong grabs Sokka's hand right as Hei Bai disappears, taking Sokka with him. Naruto and Ong are flung forward and land on the hard ground next to each other. Time skip. Naruto and Ong awake at the same time and look around them. They see a large wooden statue of a bear with smaller bear statues around it, seemingly bowing down. Naruto and Ong look at each other and sigh, knowing they lost Sokka. They start to walk back to the village, heads hung low. When they get back, they see Katara holding on to Sokka's boomerang tightly as the old man walks up to her with Naruto's extra layer of green clothing. I am sure your friend wouldn't want you to get a cold, the old man says before handing the clothing to Katara, who immediately takes it and wraps it around herself. The old man and Katara talk about Ong and Naruto returning, even when they are standing right in front of them. The sun is rising, perhaps they will return soon, the old man says. What? No. We're right here, Ong says, waving his hand in front of the two's faces. Naruto looks down at his hands and realizes that it wasn't his white skin, but his body was glowing blue. Ong? Naruto asks, right as the sun starts to come up, clearly showing his slightly transparent form. What? Whoa. You're blue. Ong says, surprised before looking down at himself. Whoa. I'm also blue. Ong exclaims. I know why they can't see or hear us. It's cause we're in the spirit world, Naruto concludes, causing a shocked expression to come over Ong's face. Well, what do we do? Ong asks. I don't know, Naruto says, unsure of himself. He and Ong share a look before Naruto closes his eyes and tries to think. Well, if we are in the spirit world, that means maybe I can find help somehow. Naruto states before sitting down in a meditative position. Ong copies Naruto and sits down as well. After a couple minutes of nothing, Ong gets up and looks forward, seeing a sparkling light. Hey Naruto. Do you see that? Ong says, pointing upwards and seeing a blue-tinted dragon rushing forward. Ong starts to scream, scared for his life as Naruto just watches. The dragon flies forward and swoops up Ong, leaving Naruto. Naruto watches as the dragon takes Ong away and at one point makes eye contact with dragon. Naruto looks closer at the dragon, who seems to slightly bow his head to him before taking off. Naruto watches as the dragon takes off with Ong before standing up. He looks out for a few seconds before feeling fur brush up against his leg. He turns around but is tackled to the ground and pinned. He looks up and sees a lion snow leopard on top of him. Naruto tries to push back and get up but is easily pinned back by the immense strength of the big cat. The cat leans forward and Naruto closes his eyes, thinking that the animal is going for the neck. Naruto then feels fur up against his forehead. He opens his eyes and is met by the predator eyes of the leopard. The leopard starts to rub against Naruto playfully. It jumps off of him, allowing Naruto to stand up. Naruto looks down at the big cat, which was currently brushing up against his leg, begging for affection. Naruto kneels down and pets the cat, causing it to purr. The leopard suddenly runs off, leaving Naruto to chase after it. Naruto runs after the big cat through the woods, maneuvering around the trees, trying not to lose sight of the leopard. He weaves through the trees before coming to a stop, lost. He looks forward, trying to see if the cat is in the distance before turning around. When Naruto turns around, he is no longer in the forest, but rather back in his home. He looks down in front of him and sees a green bird with deep blue eyes, using his beak on his feathers. Naruto kneels down and reaches out to touch the bird. As he reaches forward, the bird starts to glow. The closer his hand gets, the brighter the glow is. Naruto has to shield his eyes as he reaches out and finally touches the bird, being taken into the heart of a tree. He looks around and now sees a strange old man with long white beard. It's been quite some time, Naruto says, old man, in his deep and echoing voice. Naruto just looks confused at the unknown man. Who are you? My name is Iron, the spirit of nature. It's good to see you too, Zyra, Naruto says, a large smile now on his face. But, why am I here? Naruto asks. That is the question, isn't it? Well, La says before he looks upwards. The Avatar is calling you back. When you and your friends reach the calling forest, come find me. The longer we stay apart, the weaker both of us shall become, Zyra says before disappearing. Naruto watches him disappear, thinking about what he said. Has he been becoming weaker? Naruto is then pulled forward and gasps heavily. He looks up and sees a statue of a bear. He starts to regain his breath and finally feels the hand on his shoulder. He turns around and sees Aang. We need to get back to the village, Aang says, earning a nod from Naruto. Aang then spins his staff around before opening it into a glider. Get on, Aang says. Naruto just looks at him like he's crazy. Yeah, no, we're walking, Naruto says before starting to walk through the forest and towards the village. Time skip. Naruto and Aang eventually get back to the village, right as the sun sets. They walk up to the main village building and Katara runs out. She runs up and jumps at Aang, wrapping her arms around his neck. Aang lightly hugs her back before she realizes what she's doing. She pulls back and turns to Naruto and gives him a quick hug as well. She looks at the two with a smile before noticing that her brother was missing. Where's Sokka? Katara asks, causing Aang and Naruto to look down in guilt and shame. We're not sure, Aang says, right as the sun fully sets. Naruto and Aang look out and both hear a high-pitched hum. Go back inside, Katara, Naruto says as Aang starts to walk towards the entrance of the village. What? Why? Katara asks before seeing a serious look on Naruto's face. She reluctantly nods and walks back inside. Naruto closes the door before running over to Aang. What's the plan? Naruto asks. I'm not sure, but I know that what needs to happen will come to us in the moment, Aang says, in a mature manner. You know, for someone so old, to say something so stupid in such a wise manner, Naruto starts but is cut off by Aang. Trust me, Naruto, Aang says, looking at Naruto seriously. Naruto nods in acceptance before looking back out at the forest. Hei Bai was nowhere to be seen. They waited a couple more minutes and nothing else happened. I don't think he's coming, Aang says before turning around and walking back. Naruto stayed at the entrance, however, feeling Hei Bai to be near. The soft sound of chimes hitting each other. He suddenly hears a loud roar and turns around to see Hei Bai smashing a house. Debris from the house launches off and flies towards Aang, who creates an air bubble around him and pushes it away. Naruto runs up and throws several small daggers made of wood at Hei Bai. This causes the spirit to turn to him and roar. Hei Bai runs at him and knocks him away. Naruto looks around and sees a tall wooden pole. He uses his wood bending, causing a huge tree to hit the spirit. He touches the spirit's forehead and sees within the monster a giant and calm panda. He drops down to the ground and the spirit just looks at him, intrigued and confused. You're the spirit of this forest. I understand. You're upset and angry because your home was burned down by the Fire Nation, Naruto says right as Aang runs up next to him. Aang, who had heard everything that Naruto had said, decided to help reason with Hei Bai. When I saw the forest had burned, I was sad and upset too, but my friend gave me hope and he helped growing the forest back to its former glory, Aang says before pulling the acorn that Katara had given him earlier out of his pocket. He shows it to Hei Bai before placing it on the ground. Naruto and Aang take a couple steps back, allowing Hei Bai to pick up the small acorn with his large hands. Hei Bai looks at it for a second before turning around. As he turns around, he turns back into his natural form as a large panda. He walks out of the village and as he does, dozens of bamboo sticks quickly grow. People start to appear as they walk out of the bamboo and the rest of the village comes out of the building. Naruto, Aang, and Katara all look out at the bamboo, searching for Sokka before he comes out, visibly confused. Sokka. Katara yells in glee before running up to her brother and hugging him tightly. Naruto and Aang walk up to the two siblings. What happened? Sokka asks, rubbing his head. You were trapped in the spirit world for 24 hours. How are you feeling? Katara asks, concerned for her older brother. Sokka seems to think about his answer before immediately gripping his crotch area. Like I seriously need to use the bathroom, Sokka says before running off. Later, the four are getting ready to take off when the village leader comes up to them, as well as a few others. Thank you, Avatar. If only there were a way to repay you for what you have done, the man says. Naruto turns his head away slightly before mumbling under his breath. Yeah, just give him all the credit, Naruto mumbles, a bit peeved. You could give us some supplies and some money, Sokka says, obviously not understanding what is socially acceptable to say. This earns a hit in his side from Katara. Sokka. Katara yells. What? We need stuff, Sokka defends. The village leader smiles before bowing towards Aang. It would be an honor to help you prepare for your journey, the man says before walking off, presumably to go gather supplies for them. While the village leader does that, Katara turns to Aang with a smile. I'm so proud of you, Aang. You figured out what to do all on your own, Katara says, causing Naruto to become even more frustrated. I hate traveling with the Avatar, Naruto says under his breath. Sokka, who was right next to him, heard him say this. I know, right? He gets all the credit and glory, Sokka says to Naruto. Naruto turns to Sokka, smiles slightly before nodding. Isn't that right, brother, Naruto says, putting out his fist. Sokka looks at it, surprised before excitedly fist bumping Naruto. Actually, I did have a little help, Aang says, causing Naruto to sigh in relief. Finally, Naruto says. I had a dragon in the spirit world that helped me, Aang says, causing Naruto to groan. Are we still in the spirit world? Naruto asks Sokka. Sokka just shrugs in response, a bit more used to it than Naruto was. And there's something else, Aang says, looking down, seemingly deep in thought. What is it? Sokka asks. I need to talk to Roku, and I think I found a way to contact his spirit, Aang says. That's great. Katara exclaims. Creepy, but great, Sokka says. There's a temple on this crescent-shaped island, and if I go there on the solstice, I'll be able to speak with him, Aang explains. But the solstice is tomorrow, Naruto points out. Yeah, and there's one more problem. The island is in the Fire Nation, Aang says, causing looks of worry to cross over the others' faces. And so, it's off to the Fire Nation. Naruto stood with his arms crossed as he watched Aang pull on Appa's reins, trying to make him leave the village. The saddle was empty, and Katara and Sokka were not with the boy and his pets. Naruto had a raised eyebrow as he waited for him to realize Appa wasn't going to let him get away with his plans. The moon was high in the sky as Katara and Sokka came up behind him. What's going on here? Sokka asked. What do you think? Aang's trying to force Appa to leave you two behind because it's too dangerous. Naruto rolled his eyes. Hey, what about you? Sokka complained. I know Aang too well and confronted him about such an act hours ago. Naruto shrugged. Let's go, Appa. Come on, boy. Aang complained as he pulled on the reins. Appa simply roared back in response. Look, I'm sorry, but Katara and Sokka aren't coming to the Fire Nation with us. If they got hurt, I'd never forgive myself. Aang frowned before turning to Appa, annoyed. So get your big butt off the ground and let's go. Aang pulled some more and the bison refused to move. The airbender pulled hard enough that the reins snapped back and pulled the boy to the floor, where he sat defeated. Sokka and Katara were trying not to laugh. I think his big butt is trying to tell you something. Sokka finally spoke, catching the boy's attention. Aang turned around to see the two siblings with Naruto and the villagers behind them. Naruto. Aang complained. Hey, I didn't get them, they know you better than you think. Naruto defended his hands up in surrender. Please don't go, Aang. The world can't afford to lose you to the Fire Nation. Neither can I, Katara admitted. Aang frowned and thought before he got to his feet. But I have to talk to Avatar Roku to find out what my vision means. I need to get to the fire temple before the sun sets on the solstice. That's today. Aang worried as Naruto rolled his eyes and walked to Appa, walking up the bison's tail to sit in the saddle as Aang bent himself up onto Appa's head. Appa finally got up and began to walk as Naruto moved to Aang's side. He grabbed the reins and stopped the bison as the two water tribe siblings stood before the giant bison. Aang, what are you trying to prove here? Going by yourself? Naruto asked. I won't be alone. I have you. Aang reminded him. Right, cause the two of us are so formidable. He agreed. We're not letting you go into the Fire Nation, Aang, Katara said strongly. At least not without your friends. We got your back. Sokka smiled. Momo landed on Aang's shoulder and Appa licked Sokka, who whined in the complaint. It's a long journey to the Crescent Island. The chief walked towards them and handed Naruto a parcel, who handed it to Aang. You'll have to fly fast to have any chance of making it before sundown. Good luck, he said, and Aang smiled. Thank you for your, but the chief cut him off with a point to the rising sun. Go. Katara and Sokka climbed onto Appa's back and Aang flicked the reins to allow the bison to jump into the air. So, what do you expect will happen when we get to the Fire Nation? Sokka wondered. Well, I doubt they'll allow their borders to be unguarded with all the terror they're spreading, so maybe some border police. Naruto offered as the sun came up. It's not going to be easy, that's for sure, Aang admitted. We can't waste any time on Fire Nation soldiers, Katara warned. That's why we give some defense and we fly straight over. Naruto said, nothing fancy and no offense. We don't have the time. He looked at the three and they all nodded as the sun began to rise. Katara was leaning over the edge for the saddle, scanning the water below, and Aang glanced at her before turning back to Appa. Come on, boy. We've got a long way to go. Faster. He urged. Aang. We got trouble. Katara informed. Yeah, and it's gaining fast. Sokka confessed, causing the two up front to turn around. Naruto groaned. Below them in the water was a Fire Nation Navy ship. It was puffing out steam as it followed the bison in the waters. For God's sake Zuko. Now is not the time. Aang complained. What do we do if he attacks? Sokka worried. Aang steer, Sokka, keep an eye on the back, Katara below, and I'll deal with any attacks, Naruto said, getting up and walking to the back of the bison. They watched as a catapult was lifted from below the deck. Naruto raised his arms as the cargo was set on fire, and within the minute, it was shot into the air at them. Fireball. Katara shouted, I'm on it. Naruto assured. Aang held the reins tight in case the boy missed, but he raised his arms. Trees suddenly grew from the ground below just in time to hit the fireball. The two collided. We have to get out of Zuko's range before he shoots another hot stinker at us. Katara said as he held his nose. And you make Appa go any faster? Sokka demanded, his hands on his nose also. Yeah, but there's just one little problem, Aang muttered, causing the three to turn and see, within the ocean, dozens of Fire Nation ships, and all bigger than Zuko's. Blockade. And I've bet they've all got catapults too. Naruto cursed. If we fly north, we can go around the Fire Nation ships and avoid the blockade. It's the only way. Aang believed. There's no time. Katara believed. This is exactly why I didn't want you to come. It's too dangerous. Aang thought. And that's exactly why we're here. If we didn't come, you'd have never gotten to the temple in time for fear of getting shot down, Naruto said. Stuff those ships, he said before taking a deep breath and grinning. Let's run this blockade. Sokka encouraged. Appa? Yip. Yip. The bison dove down towards the blockade. Naruto. They're lighting the catapults. Sokka shouted. Good. Naruto grinned. Let's make them waste their ammo. The boy continued waving his hands as several catapults fired the fireballs at them, not caring about the ship down below them. Aang began to steer the bison through as Katara and Sokka cried and ducked into the saddle. Naruto kept on growing more wood, the fireballs kept colliding with the wood, but not actually hitting Appa. A few of the balls exploded before them, and bits of embers hit the water surrounding the group, but luckily none penetrated through and hit Appa. Are you alright, Naruto? Aang asked. So far. He nodded as he blocked out another one. Just keep dodging. As a result, Aang pulled Appa up into the clouds, and no sooner than he had the fireballs come flying blindly through them. The bison weaved this way and that, the passengers inside screaming as Naruto tried to intercept the firebombs. I know it's better for us up here, but I can't see where the bombs are coming from now. He said, annoyed, not mentioning he was too far from the ground to grow trees anymore. They ran at the blockade, almost through the heavy fire of it all. Naruto glanced forwards to see a catapult sitting waiting, and his eyes narrowed. He gasped when it was fired straight at them. Aang. Naruto warned. Aang spun around, and he aimed his foot at the ball. Air went rushing at the firebomb as water twirled its way into the middle, and the entire bomb was blasted apart and into pieces, allowing the bison to fly straight through the middle. Naruto and Aang flew backwards and hit the bison, Katara and Sokka grabbing them so they didn't fly off past them, and Appa suddenly flew right through the ships and past the blockade. We made it. Aang cheered, punching his fist to the air before sharing a double high five with Naruto. Yeah. I knew we could do it. And you wanted to go around. He rolled his eyes. Sokka and Katara stood looking worried and not all that excited about their victory. We got into the Fire Nation, Sokka realized in disbelief as his shoulders slumped. Great. Now we just gotta find this crescent island and it's a temple, Naruto said, grinning. Easy peasy. Aang nodded. They flew until the sun began to set, Appa getting tired and Naruto falling asleep from him defending parade before Aang suddenly shouted and all were alerted and awake again. There it is. The island Roku's dragon took me to. The three looked up to literally see a crescent island with a volcano in the middle. A small temple stood on the left-hand side of the lava river. Thank God, let's talk to Roku and leave before anything else bad happens. Naruto yawned. Appa landed on the safe ground near the pathway to the temple, and the four descended. Naruto and Aang turned to Appa's face, patting him as Sokka began to stretch, and Katara smiled at the animal. You did it, buddy. Nice flying. Aang smiled. Appa groaned and rolled over in exhaustion. Oh. You must be tired. Katara cooed as he rubbed his belly. No, Sokka answered, causing Katara to look at him annoyed as Sokka stretched. I'm good. He began to jog on the spot. Refreshed and ready to fight some firebenders. Katara turned to his brother with a narrowed look on her face. I was talking to Appa. She confessed. Sokka stopped mid-jog. Well, I was talking to Momo. He covered up, pointing over his shoulder to the lemur hanging upside down on the branch. Don't be harsh, Katara, he did a very good job, Naruto said with a sly smirk, but his tone seemed to have gone entirely over his head. Thank you, Naruto, Sokka said smiling. Finally, someone appreciated. I was, of course, talking about Momo, Naruto interrupted his glorious thoughts. Katara laughed along with Naruto, while Sokka seemed to be looking down at the ground in despair. After they stopped laughing, they soon followed Ong up the pathway and to the temple. It held 5 floors, including the ground floor, and the roofs turned and pointed upwards, glowing yellow in the setting sun. They reached the temple and ducked behind a low wall carefully. "I don't see any guards," Sokka confessed. "The Fire Nation must have abandoned the temple when Avatar Roku died," Katara thought. "Yeah, but you'd think there'd be someone," Naruto muttered, eyeing the temple. "It's almost sundown. We'd better hurry," Ong said. They jumped over the wall and headed for the door, which was encased in a red and gold fire plate. They ran into the room and began to creep over the floor as Momo landed beside them. "Wait, I think I heard something," Sokka said as he stopped, causing the other 3 to stop too. "You had to say that, didn't you?" Naruto sighed, and they turned around to see their exit blocked by 5 men wearing red. "We are the Fire Sages. Guardians of the Temple of the Avatar," the one in front explained. "Great. I am the Avatar," Ong said with a grin as he stepped forwards. Naruto, along with Katara and Sokka faced him. Did he have to go and announce to some people of Fire Nation that he's the Avatar? "We know." The Fire Sage took a fire-bending pose and shot fire at the 4. Ong moved forwards and slapped his hands together, causing the fire to part in 2 and disperse, missing the 4 as it ran over the floor before disappearing. 2 more firebenders joined in, and Ong swung some air to block that. "I'll hold them off. Run," Ong shouted at the 3. Ong swung his foot and caused the 5 sages to have their feet knocked out from under them. Naruto and Ong turned quickly, running after the first 2 and away from the Fire Sages. They quickly rejoined Katara and Sokka, skidding to halt in front of them from another corridor. "Follow me," Ong shouted. "Do you know where you're going?" Sokka questioned. "Nope," Ong confessed as he rounded a corner. "My suggestion is UP," Naruto said as he skidded to a halt at the corner and turned to run back past the 2, Ong quickly following him as a Fire Sage was hot on his heels. "Wrong way," Ong admitted. "Come back," the Fire Sage called after them as Sokka and Katara quickly followed the other 2 benders. Ong skidded to another stop to turn another corner, and Naruto almost toppled over as he followed the 2 siblings turning after them as the Fire Sage continued to follow. Naruto almost ran into the boy as he stopped short again at a window, their path being a dead end, and they turned to the Fire Sage with worry. "I don't want to fight you. I am a friend," Ong said. "Firebenders aren't our friends," Sokka snapped, and Naruto shot him a look as he and Ong took a bending stance. To their surprise, however, the Fire Sage suddenly got down on his knees and bowed to Ong at his feet. "How about now?" Naruto asked Sokka. "I know why you're here, Avatar," the Fire Sage admitted. "You do?" Ong asked as he relaxed his pose and looked surprised. "Yes." The man stood up. "You wish to speak to Avatar Roku. I can take you to him," he allowed. Ong turned to his friends, who looked just as confused. "How?" Ong wondered. The man moved a lantern to his left and a small hole sat under it. He placed his hand on the hole and his other hand on his shoulder before shooting fire into the wall. Beside him, fire shot within the wall and it moved to reveal a doorway. Stairs stood within the rocky cavern which proceeded downwards. "This way," the man pointed. The 4 looked slightly weary before a voice sounded. "Find him. Time is running out. Quickly," the sage urged. "I'm more willing to trust this man than those ones," Naruto said, and he grabbed Sokka's arm and pulled him into the tunnel with a cry. Ong and Katara nodded, and the sage followed them in, shutting the secret door behind them. Around them, rock and lava dripped through the cave, and the 4 glanced at it as they walked in silence, Shiryu having moved to lead the way. Avatar Roku once called this temple his home. He formed these secret passages out of the magma. He was a lava bender? Is that a thing? Naruto asked, surprised. "It can be for earthbenders," Shiryu admitted. "Or if you're the Avatar." Naruto nodded with a sigh. "Did you know Avatar Roku?" Ong wondered. "No. But my grandfather knew him. Many generations of fire sages guarded this temple long before me. We all have a strong spiritual connection to this place," Shiryu said as they began to move upwards. "Is that how you knew I was coming?" Ong wondered. "A few weeks ago, an amazing thing occurred. The statue of Avatar Roku, its eyes began to glow," Shiryu confessed. "Katara, remember the air temple?" Sokka remembered. "Yeah. A few weeks ago, that's when we were at the air temple. Avatar Roku's eyes were glowing there too," Katara remembered. "I guess all the statues are connected no matter where in the world," Ong smiled. "At that moment, we knew you had returned to the world," Shiryu admitted. "If this is the Avatar's temple, why did the sages attack me?" Ong wondered. "Things have changed. In the past, the sages were loyal only to the Avatar. When Roku died, the sages eagerly awaited for the next Avatar to return. But he never came," the sages admitted. Ong stopped and leaned on the wall. "They were waiting for me," he realized. Sokka put his hands around the boy's shoulders. "Hey, don't feel bad. "You're only 100 years late," he said, earning a whack to the head by Katara. Even if you hadn't vanished, you'd have either perished or not have been able to return here anyway, what with the Fire Nation out to get you." Katara frowned. "I guess they gave up hope." "Yes, they did." Shia nodded. "They lost hope the Avatar would ever return. When Fire Lord Sazin began the war, my grandfather and the other sages were forced to follow him." The sage shook his head in dismay. "I never wanted to serve the Fire Lord. When I learned you were coming, I knew I would have to betray the other sages." "Thank you for helping me." Aang bowed at the man. Shia smiled before they continued. "We'll follow these stairs to the sanctuary." Their stairway quickly began to spiral upwards, and they climbed them one after the other. "Once you're inside, wait for the light to hit Avatar Roku's statue. Only then will you be able to speak with him," Shia explained. Shia removed the trapdoor above them, and the five quickly moved out of the tunnel. "No!" Shia suddenly cried as he walked towards a door. "Shia, what's wrong?" Aang asked as they followed, looking up at the fire-decorated door before them. There were 5 blackened spots in which were the open mouths of dragons, and each twirled and swirled its way over a golden flame with red gems. "The sanctuary doors, they're closed," he said, confused. "Can't you just open them with firebending? Like you opened that other door?" Katara wondered as Sokka looked at the door, and Aang pushed on it hopelessly. "No. Only a fully realized avatar is powerful enough to open this door alone," Shia admitted, and Aang frowned before putting his hand on it. "Otherwise, the sages must open the doors together with 5 simultaneous fire blasts," he explained. 5 fire blasts, huh? Sokka thought before an idea came to his mind, and he looked up at a lantern above his head with a grin. "I think I can help you out." "How so?" Naruto wondered. "You have 4 other firebenders in that bag of yours?" he asked. "No, but I do have something that might just work as well," he said as he rummaged through his bags, the other 4 watching him with interest. He began to pick out animal skins and then pulled the lamp off the wall. "This is a little trick I picked up from my father. I sealed the lamp oil inside an animal skin casing. Shia lights the oil-soaked twine and taught it. Fake firebending." He held up one of the animal skins he just poured lamp oil into. "You've really outdone yourself this time, Sokka." Katara smiled. "Yeah, I'll give you the props for this one." Naruto nodded in agreement. "This might actually work." Shia smiled. They filled the rest of the bags and put them all within the dragons' mouths, Sokka making sure they sat in securely. "The sages will hear the explosions, so as soon as they go off, you rush in," Shia said, turning to Aang behind them. "It's almost sunset. Are you ready?" Katara asked as he and Naruto smiled at Aang. Sokka quickly rejoined the others behind the pillars, putting his fingers in his ears as Katara held Momo safely out of the way. "Definitely." Aang nodded. Naruto grinned at the boy and they turned to Shia, who sent a spark across all the twine, and they instantly began to burn. Shia joined Aang and Naruto behind a pillar, and they watched expectantly as the twine burned and Sokka held onto Katara's legs. The explosion went off and smoke went everywhere, but Aang didn't hesitate. He ran forwards and grabbed the handle, but nothing budged. "They're still locked," he called as the smoke vanished, the 4 coming out for behind the pillars. "It didn't work." Shia sighed as Aang fell to his knees. He looked at the door angrily, frustrated Beefier standing and taking a few steps back. "Why won't it open?" "Arg." Aang threw air after Arbalest at the door, but the entire thing stayed sealed to its hinges. "That won't solve anything, Aang," Naruto said. "Aang, stop. There's nothing else we can do." Katara grabbed the boy's arm and pulled him away from the door. "Unless we find more firebenders, there's no way to open it," Naruto sighed. "I'm sorry I put you through all this for nothing," Aang said, his head hanging in disappointment. Sokka approached the door and ran his finger through the soot in confusion. "I don't get it. That blast looked as strong as any firebending I've seen," he said, frowning as Momo looked in through one of the mouths. Katara's expression suddenly lit up. "Sokka, you're a genius," she suddenly said, earning confused looks from everyone. Sokka and genius don't really belong in the same sentence, Naruto thought, crossing his arms. "Wait, how is Sokka genius? His plan didn't even work," Aang reminded her. "You're right. Sokka's plan didn't work, but it looks like it did," Katara said, and Naruto looked at the door before him, expression widened in understanding. "Did the definition of genius change in the last 100 years?" Aang wondered, still confused. "No, he's right." Naruto grinned. "It looked like it worked, therefore, it looked like you got inside the sanctuary," he explained. "So?" Aang wondered, "So if you're in the sanctuary, where they don't want you to be, how are they going to get you out?" Naruto asked as Katara smiled. The boys shared a confused look. They'd have to open the doors. Shia realized. Aang and Sokka's faces lit up. They open the doors. And Aang runs in. Katara grinned. "Brilliant." Aang grinned. Now, all we need are the fire sages. Sokka grinned. The blast should have attracted them. Shio believed with a smile. Quick. We need to hide. Naruto said, grabbing Aang and pulling him behind the pillars. Shio, go and get the other sages. Sokka said as Katara quickly joined Naruto and Aang. Shio nodded and he quickly ran off. Now we'll grab the sages while you run in, okay, Aang, Naruto said, and the boy nodded. Quickly. The Avatar has entered the sanctuary. The four all ducked and Shio entered the hall with the other four sages. How did he get in? Another questioned. I don't know. But look at the scorch marks and down there. They all look to the crack under the door to see a shadow moving. He's inside. Open the doors immediately before he contacts Avatar Roku. Aang shimmied his way down the dragon tail on one of the pillars as the sages got into position in front of the doorway. With a deep breath, the fire sages shot fire at the mouths of the dragons on the door. The room lit up red and smoke protruded from the cracks around the door. As soon as the fire dispersed, the middle head spun and turned upside down around the red gem, the four other dragons fell inwards, and the three flamed symbols split down the middle to uncover the middle of the door. Red light flooded out, and the doors began to creak as they slid open to the sides. The room was dark on the other side, and the five sages waited with their hands raised only to see Momo, covered in soot and sneezing before them. It's the Avatar's lemur. He must have crawled through the pipes. We've been tricked. Momo suddenly leapt forward at the head sage, screeching and knocking the man off of his feet. Sokka and Katara ran out from behind the pillars and each covered two sages' heads with their robes. Naruto moved to grab another before he caught movement beside his eye and turned. His eyes widened before he grew frustrated. Shio quickly grabbed a fourth sage, grabbing his face and bending him over backwards. Now, Aang. Shio called, but nothing happened. Katara looked up from the sage he had lying on the floor. Aang. Now's your chance. He shouted. But for his response, fire came dancing out from behind the pillars and Naruto with them. We have a bit of a problem, Naruto admitted as the three looked at him, shocked. Zuko and Aang came out from behind the pillar, Zuko holding Aang's hands behind his back. The Avatar's coming with me. Zuko declared. For God's sake, Zuko, can't you wait like 10 minutes to kidnap him? Naruto demanded, annoyed. The sages all stood, turned and flipped until Sokka, Katara and Shio were held with their hands behind their backs and Momo flew off with another's hat. Zuko began to push Aang towards a set of stairs as Naruto balled his fists. Close the doors. Quickly. Zuko ordered. Naruto jumped and stamped his foot on the ground, causing trees to run from it and towards the staircase, covering it over and preventing Zuko from descending with Aang. Zuko turned to him angrily as Katara, Shio and Sokka were chained to a pillar, two of the sages now moving towards Naruto. Go for it, burn the wood, but remember you'll need to somewhat release Aang to do it and I'll guarantee he'll get loose. He warned. He spun and would bind the sages. Aang looked at Katara and Sokka before glancing at Naruto. He immediately struggled spun out from in front of Zuko, kicking him, causing Zuko to stumble, and then kicking him again. The sages gathered as Aang ran at Katara and Sokka and Naruto moved his arms, growing trees from outside through the windows, to knock them from their feet. Oh. Katara turned to the door, which was slowly closing. Aang bent himself into the air and he dove for the door, just slipping between the doors as they slammed shut, the fire and lock moving back into place. He made it. Katara grinned as Shio smiled in relief. A bright blue light suddenly shot from the door and everyone turned their eyes away from it before the hall was back to its usual red. Well, guess I pissed you off a little. He said, smirking ever so slightly before the other sages were broken from the branches tying them and got to their feet. Naruto looked at the four of them, one still holding Shio, and sighed. I might be a little over my head here, he whispered. You lost me the Avatar. Zuko seethed. Wouldn't be the first time. After all, I'd much rather keep my friend free and safe than locked up in some Fire Nation prison. Naruto snapped back as he took his stance. You're outnumbered, boy, give up. One of the sages ordered. Not the first time I have been outnumbered. Naruto smiled. Naruto slammed his hands on the ground, Zuko and everyone felt the ground shaking, knowing what was about to happen, the banished prince threw a blast of fire at Naruto. Still, he quickly jumped as another rushed at Naruto, the blonde jumped high before kicking the elderly man in the face, sending him face down on the ground. Zuko prepared to attack again when trees came inside, breaking the walls and shaking the whole place. Another man aimed at Naruto, ready to burn him from behind. Behind you, Katara desperately shouted, but before the man could attack, a tree branch grew below him, stabbing his kidney, before more trees tied around him, before breaking his neck with a loud snap, shocking everyone. Naruto looked at his enemies, ready to do the same to them. Don't move, turning around and seeing one of them, his fist engulfed in flames close to Katara's scared face, the man looking at Naruto with malice. Clenching his teeth, calculating his opinions, he could attack, but Katara might die, but if he gave up, they might kill everyone. I will burn her face, he shouted again. The man put his hand even closer to her face. Naruto sighed. The trees disappeared from where they came from before surrendering to them. Later, Zuko and the four sages stood at the doorway and thrust their fists forwards to fire at the dragon's mouths of the door. The room glowed red, and smoke rose, but the door did not more of unlock. Why isn't it working? It's sealed shut. Zuko complained angrily. It must have been the light. Avatar Roku doesn't want us inside. The head sage realized. Shai was tied up and kneeling on the floor with his hands behind his back a little ways from Katara and Sokka, while Naruto was lying on the floor a little ways off, not moving. Katara bit her lip as she watched the girl worried, her blue clothes dirty and slightly charred. Zuko, in his rage, turned to Shai glaring. Why did you help the Avatar? Zuko demanded. Because it was once the sage's duty. It is still our duty. Shai confessed. Clapping sounded, and the firebenders all turned to see a man, dressed in high-ranking armor, walking towards them with 6 other soldiers. He stopped with a satisfied grin on his face as Katara and Sokka glanced at Naruto not far from the new arrivals. What a moving and heartfelt performance. I'm certain the Fire Lord will understand when you explain why you betrayed him. The firebender said to Shai, grinning at the idea of the man's punishment. Commander Zhao, one of the sages, bowed, and Zuko looked at the man with disdain and shock. And Prince Zuko, it was a noble effort. But your little smokescreen didn't work. Zuko's expression hardened considerably as he stood before the man. 2 traitors, in one day, the Fire Lord would be pleased. Zuko was grabbed by one of the soldiers from behind, and his hands were restrained, causing the prince to struggle. You're too late, Zhao. The Avatar's inside, and the doors are sealed. Zuko tried to rub in his face, not allowing the man to have his prize. No matter. Sooner or later, he has to come out. Zhao knew. Sokka and Katara shared a worried look as Zuko and Shai were tied up, Shai with the siblings and Zuko on an opposite pillar to the water tribe siblings with more chains. Zhao stood and faced the doorway in anticipation. The multiple of soldiers stood on either side of the commander and raised their hands in anticipation. When those doors open, unleash all your firebending power, Zhao commanded. How's Aang going to make it out of this? Katara asked, worried, glancing at Naruto again. How are we going to make it out of this? Sokka replied. Within the next few minutes, the door began to glow blue again, and smoke billowed out from the door before it creaked open. Katara and Sokka turned their eyes from the light, Zuko doing the same. Ready, Zhao began as the light faded and the doors opened fully. 2 glowing eyes could be seen towering above them all from within the now dark sanctuary. No. Aang. Katara shouted. Fire. Zhao and his men all fired their fire at the doorway, not seeing what they were aiming at. The fire, however, simply swirled around the doorway before a tall man in Fire Nation clothes, white hair and beard appeared towering above them all. His eyes were glowing, and half of his hair was tied up in a top knot. Zhao and his men stopped in surprise, the commander with his mouth hanging open as the Avatar raised his hands and commanded the firebenders fire for himself. Avatar Roku. Shai noticed. Roku drew the fire in before it washed out in a wave over all the firebenders, and the 4 chained up. The heat caused the chains to burst and disperse as they closed their eyes and shied from the heat, which never seemed to touch them. Zuko pulled on the chain, and he quickly ran from the pillar he'd been tied to. The fire from Roku exploded the wall of the temple, and everyone turned to see the giant figure turn to the sage, who gasped and turned to run. The temple began to shake as Katara, Sokka and Shai clung to the pillar for support. Avatar Roku's going to destroy the temple. We have to get out of here. Shai warned. Not without Aang. Katara declared strongly. Roku flung his arm forwards, and a giant lava crack ran through the ground, melting and pouring into the floor and then down through the temple. With a raise of his hands, the lava from beneath shot up and burst straight through the center of the temple, up and through the room, blowing the roof off. Sokka, Naruto, and Katara hid behind a pillar as the firebenders ran and scattered down the stairway to the exit screaming. When Roku lowered his hands and released a breath, the temple discontinued its shaking, and the 2 siblings looked up in surprise. The sunlight on Roku's temple moved up and away, his glowing red eyes diminishing as the sun set. The dust and smoke all drew into Roku, who closed his eyes before all that was left was Aang, wobbling on his feet and falling to his knees as Katara, Naruto, and Sokka ran towards him. We got your back, Sokka assured as he and Katara each took one of Aang's arms and lifted him to his feet, walking out of the doorway. Thanks. Where's Shai? Aang wondered out loud. We don't know, but we need to leave. Naruto shouted. The gang left as soon as possible, and Aang watched behind as they flew behind. When the night came, Naruto and everyone closed their eyes. Everyone quickly fell asleep except Naruto, who suddenly felt like someone was looking at him. Opening his eyes, he saw blurry, someone close to him. Blue, wait, what? Fully opening his eyes, he saw a Kyoshi warrior, but she looked blue and adding to that, she seemed very familiar before he recognized her. "The Avatar Kyoshi," Naruto almost shouted before bowing his head in respect in front of who seemed like a hero from where he came from. "It's good to see you, Naruto. No need to bow to me, you're family after all," Kyoshi spoke calmly. Naruto's eyes widened at what she called him. Before he could ask what she meant, everything started becoming white. An unusually strong storm had struck the Northern Water Tribe. Normally such a storm would not be given much notice, the city being fortified to deal with such occurrences, but this one was particularly strong, as if the wind and ocean spirits had taken issue with one another, and the storm was a result of their conflict. Waves lashed at the walls of the city, some reaching dizzying heights before breaking. Snow whipped through the city, small cyclones of snow making it difficult to see. The wind and snow forced the people of the Northern Water Tribe to seek shelter, even the mightiest of their waterbenders, preferring to stay inside rather than face the might of the storm. Within the chief's palace, a young servant girl hurried about her duties. She carried with her several tiger seal pelts, distributing them to the officials and nobles that had settled down in the palace to wait out the storm. They paid her no mind, and she was thankful for that. While she was happy to be in service of the chief and his family, she was not used to dealing with so many people in one place and would rather not have her nervousness get the better of herself. "Aga." She stopped and turned towards the voice, spotting her friend Amma among the pillars. She was a bit older than Aga and had been training as a healer for almost 12 years now, and the only time they really saw each other now was at times like this, when the chief called upon the healers of their tribe and Amma helped assist the older healers. "Amma? I didn't know you finished your rounds. The only patients we had were a few boys who thought it was a bright idea to do boomerang practice in a storm." The older girl chuckled as she crossed the room to her friend. "I suppose I should get used to it in case I ever have sons. I guess." The two continued down the hall before Aga spoke again. "So, have your parents said anything about boys?" "Nothing yet," Amma said with a frustrated sigh. "I think it's my dad's fault, he's always been rather protective of me." "I know." Although Amma turned Aga towards her. "I did notice that Hasuk has been talking to me more lately." "Hasuk? Really?" Hasuk was everything a girl could want in a tribesman, tall, handsome, and a skilled warrior and hunter to boot. While marriages were usually handled by the parents speaking to each other, numerous families had approached Hasuk directly, hoping that he would pick one of their daughters. Guess he decided to do it his way. "Do you think he'll make you an engagement necklace?" "I hope so. He seems interested." The two girls giggled and continued on, as if they were oblivious to the storm raging outside. "So, any boys following you?" "I don't know, I've been pretty busy and my parents haven't said anything." "Oh well, I hope it works out for you." Aga nodded before turning down one of the darker halls, almost stopping near one of the doors. "Aga, why are you going down there?" "The chief said that I should deliver blankets to everyone." The servant replied, not stopping as she made her way down the hall. "And I didn't see the Avatar when I started my rounds, so I thought he wouldn't mind if I dropped something off at his room." She continued on, but was pulled to a halt when Amma froze her feet to the floor. "You can't seriously think about intruding on the Avatar, can you?" Amma asked as she caught up with her friend. "I've never heard of Avatar Kuruk getting angry at people." Aga countered. "I always heard he was rather nice." "That was 10 years ago. Before his fiancée got kidnapped by spirits." Aga's resolve broke down a little. Everyone in the Northern Water Tribe knew of Avatar Kuruk's loss and had mourned with him after he failed to recover her from the spirits. Aga and Amma were too young to remember that day, but every time they did see the Avatar he seemed lost. Well, it wouldn't hurt to just leave them at his door, would it? If he needs them he can come and get them. "Fine." Amma waved her hand and the ice around Aga's feet melted. "But if we get in trouble for disturbing the Avatar, I'm blaming you." "I can deal with that." The two kept walking. "Where did you learn that?" "With the ice. Sometimes the patients get squirmy, we have to find some way to keep them from injuring themselves further." Aga nodded as they approached a rather nondescript door. The chief had insisted that Avatar Kuruk take a different room, but Kuruk had insisted on this one. Aga was not sure why. Kuruk was well known to enjoying the pleasures of life, and this room was anything but pleasing. "Maybe it's closer to the spirit oasis." Aga stepped forward and knocked lightly. "Avatar Kuruk." No answer, but the door did swing inward slightly when she knocked. She gave a small gasp and backed up, but when there was no other response, her curiosity got the better of her and she peeked inside. "What are you doing?" Alma hissed. Aga gave her friend a look and pushed the door in further. "Avatar Kuruk. Are you there? I was just dropping off blankets and thought you'd like." She stopped when she had surveyed the room. "Oh no. How soon until the storm clears?" The chief of the Northern Water Tribe asked his top waterbenders. "With the Avatar's help, we could clear the storm by tomorrow morning," the eldest of the waterbenders said. Kuruk won't help. Another scoffed. He's busy preparing to enter the spirit world, as he does every year. I don't think you should be doubting Kuruk's integrity, Master Atnik. The chief said. While he is not as intense as Avatar Yangchen, Kuruk has been nothing but helpful to our tribe in times of need. Even after the loss of his fiancée, he has still come to our aid. Be that as it may, we should still prepare just in case Kuruk does not or cannot assist us. The chief frowned. He knew Kuruk and was certain that the Avatar would be more than willing to assist the other waterbenders in quelling the storm. He was about to make his decision when a serving girl and a healer rushed into the room. Oh, forgive me, the girl began, stopping when she saw the glares from the assembled waterbenders. How dare you barge in on our meeting like this? One waterbender shouted. Leave, before you make the situation worse for you. Atnik said, and the two girls began to leave before the chief spoke again. Wait, he said, the girls stopping and turning. Whatever you wanted to say must be urgent if you are to come in here so quickly. What is the matter? The serving girl took a moment to compose herself. Well, I was delivering blankets as you said I should, and I thought I'd give one to Avatar Kuruk. And what? Speak up, child. When I went to his room it was empty. I didn't see anything that Kuruk owned. I think he left the palace and went out into the storm. A shocked silence filled the room. You're lying. A different waterbender said. I'm not. Kuruk would know better than to go out into a storm. The lead waterbender said. Even if he is the Avatar, he's not the kind of man to tempt fate like that. Let's not argue over this. The chief stood and walked over to the girls. Take us to the Avatar's room, perhaps you merely panicked and Kuruk has not left us. The girls nodded and began walking, the chief and his waterbenders following close behind. Kuruk wouldn't just leave like that. The lead waterbender repeated as they made their way down the halls. Maybe he just went to a different part of the palace. Another said. With all his things? Atnik asked, shaking his head. Hopefully this is just some kind of joke and the Avatar will return. This is coming from the man who said the Avatar would not come to our aid. The lead waterbender responded. I may doubt his willingness to help our people, Atnik said, but outright abandoning us. Kuruk wouldn't do something like that. The group stopped at the room that Kuruk had requested. The two girls stood aside as the chief pushed the door open, the group gasping when they realized the situation. There was nothing left. Avatar Kuruk was gone. Kuruk pulled his polar bear dog pell tighter as he trekked through the snow, his eyes fixed on the horizon. A quick blast of fire helped him as he moved, but the intensity of the storm meant that his path was filled in quicker than he could move. Moving into the Avatar state might have helped, but every time he tried to concentrate, something held him back. You can't do this, Kuruk. He looked up and saw a woman, a specter in the wind that flickered in and out of existence as the elements whipped around them. She was dressed in the traditional yellow and orange robes of the air nomads, the front half of her head shaved to show the arrow tattoo that denoted her status as an airbending master. I've done everything I can, Kuruk responded, another blast of fire melting the snow around him. And that creature that stole Umi from me still eludes me. I'm not talking about that. The spirit of Yangchen said. The Avatar must place the needs of the world before their own. This storm threatens your people, and you cannot abandon them like this. But I cannot abandon Umi. She's somewhere in the spirit world, in the clutches of some monster, and I must find her. You are allowing your desires cloud your judgment, and you are placing not only the Northern Water Tribe at risk, but yourself. If you stay out here any longer, you will die, and the world may very well fall out of balance without your presence. Kuruk paused for a moment, eyeing the image of his past life. The world has held up after your time as Avatar. It can hold up if I die. Kuruk, stop this folly and go back, your self-destructive actions will only bring pain to both yourself and the world. Kuruk stopped trying to melt the snow around him and focused, not looking up as Yangchen's specter faded from view. She was right, again, the Northern Water Tribe needed his help, and just walking off into the frozen tundra would not solve anyone's problems. Yes, I need to reevaluate my impulsiveness once I get through this. But he could not sit idly while that monster had Umi. Every day that he delayed, the opening to enter the spirit world shrank, and if he waited too long then that opportunity would be lost for another year, and Kuruk could not wait that long. I can't going back. He said, power building up inside him. But I will not abandon anyone. Eyes glowing bright, Kuruk launched himself into the air with a powerful air blast, twisting his arms around as he pulled in both air and snow. The chill of the air around him stabbed into his limbs for the briefest of instances before the energy flowing through him nullified the pain. Kuruk continued to pull at the elements around him, and gradually the storm began to die down. Each cloud and snowdrift was compressed into an area smaller than an Arctic hen, Kuruk's face twisting into a scowl as water and air were compressed. An errant wind threatened to blow him off course, but with a twist of his free hand, he tamed that wind. The storm had died down to much more manageable levels, and with a sweep of his hands, Kuruk dismissed the compressed air and water. The wind and ice exploded outward in a massive disk, dissipating long after Kuruk had lost sight of it. Another pull of airbending brought Kuruk back to Earth, and with a deep breath he dismissed his past lives. "It's finished," he said as his eyes returned to their normal hue. "The Northern Water Tribe is safe." With another sigh, Kuruk's knees gave out and he collapsed into the snow. He tried to get back up and move on, but the fatigue from defusing the storm had taken a toll on his body, and while he did dissipate most of the storm, there was still enough wind to slowly coat him in snow. He wanted to move on through the snow, but his spirit was ready to move to a new destination. I shall find you soon." In the southern Earth Kingdom lay a small fishing village, shielded from the world by ocean and the remains of a once great mountain range. As the world faced turmoil and tribulation, with kingdoms and avatars coming and going, it had remained unchanged. Farmers worked the same stretches of land their ancestors had, fishermen fished in the same ranges. The town was static, a piece of the past that was unwilling to move forward. However, not all changes were unheard of. Near the edge of town, near some of the farms the populace maintained, two young children waited outside their home, the boy stabbing a stick into the dirt while his older sister sat on the porch, perfectly fine to be as far away from her brother as possible. They had wanted to be inside in order to see their mother have her baby, but they had been sent outside until everything was taken care of. While they could not see the baby, they could still speculate, and that kept their minds entertained for some time. "So," Lee asked, turning his attention away from the dirt and up to his sister, "what do you think he's gonna be like?" "He?" his sister May asked, raising an eyebrow. "Mom's having a girl, not a boy." "No, she's not," Lee shouted, returning to swinging his stick around. "He and I are gonna go everywhere. We'll go up to Ba Sing Se and join the Earth King's army, and then we're gonna beat up thieves and robbers like those heroes Grandpa Zoo talked about. Maybe we'll even see the Avatar. Won't it be cool to see the Avatar?" I suppose May turned away. "But my sister wouldn't be interested in fighting and beating people up." "So, what? You gonna make her look like some mad hog monkey?" This drew a glare from May. "No. We're gonna be just as pretty as those girls from Amashu and Ba Sing Se. Maybe we'll be able to have tea with the Avatar rather than just seeing him." She got a faraway look in her eye. "I heard the Avatar is such a strong bender, he can lift 10 boulders with 2 fingers and run across Ba Sing Se in a few seconds. He probably enjoys meeting lots of people, going to parties and other stuff like that." "Who wants to go to parties?" Lee pointed his stick at May. "Besides, the Avatar'd be too busy beating up bad guys to go do girly stuff." "Parties are not girly." May shot back, rising up to stand over her little brother. She was the oldest, she would have her way, but Lee did not seem to understand that. "They are too," he said, bringing down his stick. "Are not. Are too. Are not. Are too. Kids." May and Lee were shaken from their argument by their father, a heavisid man in his mid-40s. The two turned to face him as he kneeled down to be on eye level with them. "Why are you fighting?" Lee said parties were girly. May cried, pointing at Lee. "Well, they are." "Oh, I wouldn't say that," their father said, sitting down and making himself more comfortable. "Your grandfather used to tell me about the celebrations the Earth Kings of old would throw his victorious soldiers after great wars. They would have great champions come forth and perform feats of strength, and these celebrations could last for days on end." "Really?" Lee smiled. "We're gonna do that. Me and my brother, we're gonna be big champions and win wars." "Their brother?" their father asked, raising an eyebrow before standing. "Would you two like to meet your new sister?" The two children stood in silence for a few moments, their minds trying to make sense of what was just said. "I have a sister," May cried, darting past her father and into the house. Lee stood in silence for a little longer before dropping his stick and trudging up the steps, trying his best to pout. "Now I won't be able to go to Ba Sing Se," he muttered. "You'll get your chance," his father said as he escorted Lee inside. "Besides, it doesn't have to be just you." "Yeah, but now I've got a sister. She and May are gonna do a whole bunch of girly things and I won't have any fun." "Hey, you still have me. And who knows, maybe she'll surprise you." "How?" Lee did not get an answer as they had entered his parents' bedroom. His mother was lying in bed, still sweaty from the ordeal of childbirth, and lying in her arms was the sleeping form of a baby, only her face visible beneath the blanket she had been wrapped in. May was ecstatic, leaning over and speaking all sorts of nonsense to try and get a reaction out of the newborn. "Lee?" his mother asked. "Come here and say hello to your sister." "Okay." Lee shuffled over to the bed, looking over at the baby. The newborn twitched a little, but otherwise did not react to his presence. "She's kind of cute but still a girl." "Why are her feet so big?" May asked. "How can you see her feet?" Lee responded, looking up at his older sister. "I saw them before they got her all wrapped up. It's not gonna make her ugly, is it?" "May, how could you say that?" their mother said, shifting the baby in her arms. She's not going to be ugly just because she has big feet. Your grandmother had big feet and she was very beautiful. The MA scooted in a bit closer, trying to get a better look at the baby. What's her name? There was a pause, during which the baby began to stir. She whimpered before beginning to squirm, calming down only after a few soothing words from her mother. Her name is Kyoshi. Naruto. He listened as Kyoshi stopped talking, he wondered why she was telling him that. Why are you telling me this? Naruto asked respectfully. You will eventually find out the truth when the day comes. I hope you remember who you are. Kyoshi spoke before she slowly disappeared, leaving a confused Naruto who felt the light hitting his face, looking up at the horizon, the sun was rising up. Naruto stood up and decided to prepare for the journey ahead when he felt a burning sensation on his palm. Looking down, he saw flames dancing around his right palm, but they were dark like night instead of the usual orange. What is happening to me? So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys, let me know in the comments section how was the story and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video, bye bye.